Here's some new brain fodder for you for the 21st century. And to begin with, the Mad Hatter's Committee meeting. Do you recognize it? From Alice in Blunderland, the Mad Hatter's Committee meeting. The Mad Hatter was in the chair. "Order, order," he cried, and disorder clumped noisily out of the room. "The minutes of the last meeting," he said imperiously, and the White Knight asked which minutes he wanted. The minutes that go on for days and days, the minutes that go on for hours, or the minutes that go on only for seconds. "That's a difficult one," said the Mad Hatter. "Shall we take the minutes as read?" "I can't read," said Dormouse. "Pretend to," said the Mad Hatter. "How do you pretend to?" said Dormouse, still reluctant to agree. "Like you always do," said the Mad Hatter, getting just a trifle irritated. Alice looked around the table. It was a well-attended meeting. The March Hare, the Cheshire Cat, the White Rabbit, the White Queen, the Knave of Hearts, Caterpillar, Tweedledum and Tweedledee were all in their places. Dormouse was under his. The two professional members looked down on the lay members. Their chairs were 6 inches higher. Accordingly, the lay members looked up to the professionals. And a very small black fly had settled on the wall behind the Mad Hatter's chair. "The minutes are agreed," said the Mad Hatter. "Apologies for absence?" asked the Mad Hatter. "Humpty Dumpty," said the White Knight. "He had a serious accident since we last met." "Any correspondence?" asked the Mad Hatter. "Yes, 2 matters," replied the White Knight. "We've just had a new plan from the Ogre Queen. It's on the table. It's an all-singing and dancing plan." Alice noticed that an attractive book on the table suddenly started dancing a Highland jig, and at the same time sang the Hallelujah chorus from Handel's Messiah. "What's in the plan?" asked Cheshire Cat. "Well, there's meetings." "Great," said Cheshire Cat. "New partnerships." "Wonderful," said Caterpillar. "And there's more delusion," said the Mad Hatter. "Don't you mean inclusion?" said the White Knight. "A Freudian slip," said the Mad Hatter with a wry smile. "More inclusion at a rate of 20% per annum." "Don't you mean per annum?" interposed the March Hare. "Well, it definitely says per annum," replied the Mad Hatter. "It's a bit of an enigma," said Tweedledum. "Enigma," said Tweedledee. "Either way, I move we buy it," said the Mad Hatter with some finality. "Can we afford it?" asked Dormouse, suddenly waking up. "We get paid to buy it twice the actual cost," said the White Knight helpfully. "I'm still not sure we can afford it," said Dormouse. "Oh, go back to sleep," said the Mad Hatter. And Dormouse did as he was told. "Then that's agreed." Nods all round, including Dormouse, who was nodding away with the rest of them. "We don't need to consult anyone, do we?" asked the Cheshire Cat, almost rhetorically. "Round about midnight any day next week would be suitable," replied the White Knight. "I just don't understand," said Alice, looking very bemused by this. The Mad Hatter turned to the Knave of Hearts. "Would you explain to Alice our consultative procedures?" The Knave of Hearts was something of a magician. One of his favourite tricks was to make people completely vanish. Another was to make people appear who didn't exist at all. He quite liked to don his pointy wizard hat on these occasions. This time, however, he conjured from thin air a mortarboard and a somewhat tattered black gown. There was no limit to the things he could conjure out of thin air. Most usually it was facts and figures and concept papers that bore no great relation to reality. Ever since he came across the Latin tag De minimis non curat lex, he called these his tiny mini-mice. He much preferred this to his small porkies. The Knave of Hearts, in a somewhat didactic mode, then conducted a short tutorial. To understand our consultative procedures, you must understand the meaning of consultation. The word consultation derives from the two words con and salutation. I'm sure you know the meaning of both. All you have to do is to put the two words together. We've written to the Ogre Queen respectfully suggesting that Christmas Day should be designated the annual consultation day, when all the year's consultation can take place. Is there another day in the calendar with more salutations than that one? Alice felt she had to agree. No, there isn't, she said. And it's a day of goodwill, chipped in the March Hare, and we need as much of that as we can get. But we haven't yet reached that eminently sensible state of affairs, continued the Knave of Hearts. So the next best time when people say good night to each other. I suggest we consult next Sunday night. Agreed, said the Mad Hatter. What's the other letter? asked the Mad Hatter. We're going to be inspected by the two blind mice, said the White Knight. My God, said the March Hare. No, by the two blind mice, said the White Knight. I thought there were three of them, said Caterpillar, suddenly getting a word in edgeways. One of them has just had a successful cataract operation, said the White Knight. Why isn't he here then, said Caterpillar. He's back in hospital with post-traumatic stress. Seeing things for the first time knocked him gaga. Alice noticed that the visit from the two blind mice caused no great concern. Aren't you worried? She asked. We've just bought the plan, said the Mad Hatter. Off with our heads if we hadn't, observed the March Hare. Alice noticed that everyone's laughing hilariously. Let's get down to the main business of the meeting, said the Mad Hatter. There's a resolution on the table, moved by the Knave of Hearts and seconded by the March Hare. The moon is made of cheese. Knave of Hearts, over to you. Well, I like cheese, and I can't do without it, said the Knave of Hearts. Not totally relevant, said Caterpillar. Not relevant, maybe, but important, replied the Knave of Hearts, just a trifle aggressively. Anyway, he continued, you can see for yourself, it's made of cheese, it's round. At this point, the March Hare intervened. I second the motion, he said firmly. I have the evidence. I've been given a piece. Where is it, then? Asked Alice, unable to contain her curiosity. I've swallowed it, replied the March Hare. And I've swallowed the hook, line, and sinker that came with it. Alice's curiosity turned to incredulity. You've swallowed the sinker? Wasn't it a bit indigestible? It was the very first time I swallowed it, replied the March Hare, but you get used to it. It's now a regular part of my diet. Tweedledum interposed. That's my experience too. And Tweedledee agreed. Me too, he said. Well, said the Mad Hatter, two people have said that the moon is made of cheese. One has actually eaten some. Can there be any reasonable doubt? Here, I frankly go further. I think the moon is made of the best English cheddar. An amendment, intervened Caterpillar. I believe it's Wensleydale. Cheddar, replied the Mad Hatter firmly, and Caterpillar crawled under a leaf under the table. Alice was still unconvinced. What about the moon rock brought back from the moon landing, she asked. American propaganda against the Russians, replied the Knave of Hearts. The landing was filmed in the Nevada desert, and that's where the moon rock came from. Well, I'll eat my hat, said the Mad Hatter, and promptly did so. There was a respectful silence while this was going on. When he finished, he asked whether the motion was agreed. Nemini contradicenti, said the White Knight. And, with nobody quite knowing what that meant, they all nodded their heads, including Dormouse, who was still nodding away quietly under his seat. At this point, a very strange thing happened. The small black fly on the wall behind the Mad Hatter's chair suddenly took off, whizzed 3 times around the room at great speed, buzzing all the way. Then Alice noticed that it suddenly turned into a wasp and stung the Mad Hatter right on the tip of his nose. The meeting was then adjourned. Thank you for listening. Thank you. How about some brand new thinking for the 21st century? Our world is changing beyond all recognition. The politics of the 19th and 20th centuries are now past their sell-by dates. Death of a Nightingale tells a human story with a challenging interplay of fact, fiction, satire, and commentary. It is an expose of political folly and ineptitude in education. It now takes in the 2008 credit crunch, with more startling revelations about the gross abuse of power. It explains why so many hopes have been betrayed. But it also opens up a new line of travel. If you're a serious student of politics, I invite you to get hold of a copy.